those of you that are not involved in the next meeting, would you please go ahead and leave this room?
She was surprised at how many got tripped up by their dogs.
And I think it's okay, because in the event that, I think that's how
Not in this next meeting.
fill the gap.
Leave the room, please.
Obviously, if development takes off, then we could talk about doing something else, but I'm hoping for the developer staff to kind of
But anybody can attend if they want. It is open.
help each other out. But I would be interested to see
Mr. Clay had
their water
had put his military hat on today.
Yeah, I see he has it in front of his chair over there.
like quasi, their utility coordinating or planning.
Okay, Clay, come back.
Awesome.
Was just the three of us, Clay?
Yeah, Jeff's gonna stay. Okay, Clay, come on. Jim, tell Clay to come back, please. Tell Clay to come back, please.
No, Clay's got to be involved in every discussion.
Tired already? The day hasn't begun yet, has it?
Joseph, I have to say, you clean up well.
Well, you know what, that means a lot.
I know wearing a tie is hard for you.
I tell you what, my daughter says that, "You doing with all these ties?" I was like, "You know what, I'm just trying to impress you."
I'm waiting for Clay, and then we'll officially call it to order.
How old is your daughter?
So I have two. I have a 14-year-old and a 10-year-old. So one's about to go into high school, and then one's about to go into middle school. So it's
You have-
interesting at the Johnson household.
You have drama at your house every
Oh, I
single
know.
day, don't you?
We do, but you know, looking at it from like a 30,000 level view, they're really good kids. I mean, they're gonna be a whole lot smarter than their parents, I'll tell you that. They've already surpassed me in a couple different areas.
Clay, you're on this committee. You're on the bylaws committee. You just thought you could leave.
He forgot.
Okay, excuse me.
You're holding up our meeting.
He forgot.
Okay.
He forgot he was a member. Used to be you, me, and Bill. Now it's you, me, and Fanning. Okay, I call the meeting to order. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved, Miss.
Second.
All in favor, raise your hand, and we shall move forward. All right, we are going to discuss the provisions of the amendment, and I don't know, I'm sure since you didn't realize you were on the committee, you hadn't read it. But I think, I've talked to several members, and there are some issues that I think we need to talk to our legislators about. If I can find it again. For some reason, all of a sudden, I've lost that particular, there it is, 1993. All right. I have the bylaws from 88 in front of it. One of the things that we need to address, in my opinion, the county is authorized, the county commissioners are authorized to appoint our members. I think we should ask the legislature to say that they can appoint our members with our recommendation. I think we should, I don't think the county commission should just be able to pick people they want to put on this commission. I think we should have some input because we are more familiar with people that know what they're doing with water.
Do you think it should be the other way? We
No, you
submit-
can't, the county, in order for us to be established as we are, the county has to be the one that makes the appointment.
Do you think we should say we want to, we'll recommend?
Yes,
and
I
they
think we
select?
should, I think it should be an appointment with recommendation from the Water Authority. And so ponder that. The reason we're starting this now is because we're gonna have to get it to David Knight and Karen Mathiak soon. Another issue, and Stephanie, I'm sure you've read it, and I'm sure I'm reading something wrong, but on page 2 of that amendment, it refers to 8 members, and on page 1, we're established as 9. And I
So
don't,
our legislation has, every time that it changed over the years, it added.
yeah, but on page 1 of this legislation, it says 9 members, and on page 2, it refers to each 6-year term of said 8 members. And it may be that I'm just not reading it right, and it's one of those where they were,
And
putting them in.
And I don't have it in front of me.
I just was bringing it, if you'll just look at it and
Yeah,
tell me if I'm reading
okay.
it wrong, please. But, then it refers to you can be reappointed. And I have had it suggested to me by others that we might put a limit as to the number of terms somebody can serve. Maybe you could serve 2 terms and then back off. If you really wanted to keep going, you could back off a year and ask to be reappointed the next year. But I'm a big fan of term limits. Sometimes I think people stay till they're way past their prime. But you may not feel that way, so let me hear your opinions on it.
I'm okay with that. We've seen, I think, I remember James Brooks was on here for 17 years or something like that, almost 20 years being able to do that. I believe there's a certain amount of education you have to understand what to do the business. So if we got the first tour and then the second term, I think, what's our,
I think that cuts both ways, to be honest. I mean, in some situations, it takes a couple of years really on this board for, I think, a member to actually be truly up to speed and have the knowledge that they need to be an effective board member. And so in some ways, if you're limiting those terms, then you're taking away knowledge. In some ways, when you limit them, you're getting rid of dead weight. I think maybe giving the board the ability to recommend removal.
Yeah, but they're not gonna do that.
So a 6-year term, right?
Right.
So that's a
how
pretty
about the
good
same
long-
thing
long
we're talking
period.
about, the same way
Right.
2
again?
terms.
For
Two
reappointment,
terms is 12 years.
we'll make a recommendation to the BOC for reappointments.
Are you really gonna say that we're not gonna reappoint somebody?
You did.
Did you?
You did.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes,
Okay.
so,
Well, I
let's
mean,
do it the same way again.
We didn't recommend that we not reappoint them, did we? I mean,
We voted no.
Yeah.
okay,
This board did not.
Okay.
The BOC voted.
right, that's what I'm
not to
saying.
do it. I think that we should be able to, just like we did with the recommendation to initially appoint, should be a recommendation from us to reappoint.
Okay,
Now,
that could
I
cover
think
it.
that is very hard for the board. Let's say that Clay's term is up. Are we gonna vote, okay?
We're not gonna recommend it, that's what I was thinking. If you put a 2-year term, 2-term limit, that's 12 years.
You
And then
had
said you could be
mentioned
off a year and come back.
And you had mentioned at one point, I think, Cheryl, about the 6 years being too long.
That could be too long to me, but like you said, I can speak for myself. It took me a good year and a half to even know what all of the terms, EOC or EPD or,
Yeah, I think 6 and 2 times 6 is plenty.
okay,
12 years on here is plenty, and we need new ideas, and I understand that we lose some understanding, but also we need other people to be on here. One of my issues is educating the public about what we do, and we do that by people understanding. As an example, James Brooks now out talking to people about what we do. He's not on the board, but he understands. We get more people to understand what the issues are that we're faced with.
And you are going to run into the situation that we did with Wade today. As Glenn said, the best laid plans. I mean, you recommend folks that have industry knowledge, but then in some ways, their hands are tied in some of the decisions that you have to make.
and we need to remember that we don't have to recommend people that have industry knowledge, but people that have knowledge of the community or knowledge of finance. There's a lot that goes into it. It doesn't have to be industry knowledge all the time.
I
Correct.
agree.
You've gotta have a
you need to think
well-rounded
about
board.
that. What kind of folks you're looking for to fill in those positions as well when
Right.
you're making your recommendations.
Yes, ma'am.
May I say too, and I'm going along the line with Stephanie saying, or, and I'm not speaking for me as an individual, because it's time for me to probably move on. However, I think if we start saying, you're limiting, or who's going, if this board's gonna say, we recommend that we have John Joe who has expertise in this area from Pine Tree. What about person from Orchard, some other area? I'm saying, are we gonna be looking at getting a well-rounded segment from the community? I'm afraid that we're gonna be limiting community input if we put certain limits on who's gonna be able to serve.
I don't, we're talking about time limits, but in terms of people we appoint, I don't think we should put any restriction on who we appoint.
I agree.
A teacher.
We have skill sets we want very
Right.
specifically.
And I think when you're making your recommendations, that's what you need to keep in mind, the skill sets that you're going to be losing, that you need to fill. I don't know how we put any sort of teeth into the legislation, because while I don't believe the current board would necessarily go against your recommendation, there's the possibility that you could have a board of commissioners who says, heck no, my friend wants to be on a board, and there's a spot there, and that's where I'm putting them. I mean, that has happened on boards in the city and the county in the past, and it's not, that's not just Griffin and Spalding County, that's everywhere.
Does
So
the county commission have to sign off on the amendment, or does a request for amendment just come from us?
Our local delegation can initiate legislation without,
Okay.
on its own. They don't have to have any sort of, person or group asking them to do so.
So we could just, we would be really broad in our request. You request a term limit with the option of after a year coming back, if you wanted to limit terms. Request that we have, as the water authority, the privilege to make recommendations to the county. And then the last thing that is compensation. And I think compensation is, I made $50 a meeting when I was on the school board 40 years ago. I think this,
I mean, it's
particularly
been
if you
since,
get people
what,
that work.
80 the 80s since.
Well, what it says, actually, what the wording is
But it
is
was
you will
that
get
in
no
83?
compensation except for actual expenses.
Correct.
That's on page 3. The members of the authority shall not be entitled to any compensation for their services, but shall be reimbursed for their actual expenses. So technically, we shouldn't get $20 a month.
You should get a per diem for, actually showing up, which would be what, $25 probably?
Yeah. So I think those are the 3 things that I had talked about and had people talk to me about, asking the legislature to consider were term limits, appointment with recommendation, because, that's how we lost Bill. If we could have said we would like to recommend him to be reappointed for a second term, then he could have stayed on another time. But we didn't have that authority.
All right, so let's make sure we're all on the same sheet. We're talking about 6 with a second additional 6.
Right, you can do 12 years, unless we
right.
want to reduce the length of the term.
Fanny, you good with 6 and 6?
I'm fine.
Jeff? You good with 6 and 6?
Do you want to make a motion that we ask the legislature to consider limiting terms to 2?
All right, so first recommendation is, I make a motion that we make a change to the bylaws to say 6 with an additional 6.
Well, we can't change the bylaws. We have to take this is a recommendation that we take
Yeah,
to the
this is our local
legislators
legislation that
to do a
governs.
change to the amendment. And I haven't, do you want to second it?
Sure, I would say.
Okay, for discussion. Do we have to vote on this amendment again for the whole county? Or since it's an amendment to an amendment?
No, it's so local legislation works, in a kind of crazy way, because it just happens, basically. We tell our legislature
Election office.
what we want. They have legislative council, draft something that typically makes no sense. I'm sorry if I get on the soapbox or if I sound bitter about all that, but I am. And then it just, basically, if a delegation from anywhere in the state presents local legislation, it's gonna get passed. It's just
But does it have to be put before the voters?
No.
Okay,
It's
okay.
put before the General Assembly.
Okay.
If they pass it, then it's good. And
Okay.
there's lots of bad in the way that works, but that's how this would work.
Okay, I have a motion and a second to recommend to the legislative
Can-
committee.
Delegation.
Oh,
can I
wait,
ask-
Jeff wants to say something, I'm sorry.
Can I ask Joseph what his thoughts are on this, from that perspective, from your side of things?
Well, I can tell you, having a consistent board is good just from the standpoint of not having to, I guess, position and have different, competing views on a regular basis, but I do understand the benefit of having a new set of eyes come in. People generally bring a different perspective. When you think about it, 12 years total, that's a long time.
It's a big commitment.
Yes, it is a big commitment.
Yeah, if I served 3 terms, I'd be 90 when I got off. Not quite, but almost.
Okay. All
So
right,
I have the motion and I have a second.
this is just
Oh,
on the
yes.
terms, right?
Fanny, just limiting terms, yes.
Okay, a comment. I have no problem with the limiting terms of whatever. I do have a problem with taking things to the legislators, because as Stephanie just mentioned, and I have seen so many times, how they just go, in fact, I have sat in on some sessions where if a local legislation takes something to the general legislature, nobody really looks at it, they just say, here, pass it, and it's done. I just have a problem with taking it directly to the legislators rather than going past our local board. I always
Oh,
have
well,
a
if-
problem with that.
And it has to happen that way, unfortunately.
I know.
But it could, y'all could direct me to draft the amendment, to present to them, and you would have the opportunity to review the amendment. I can't say that they would actually present what I sent to them, but, why not? It's less work for them if we do it that way.
Yes, and we have had some that have not, we've talked, well, but we
They
didn't put it.
hear but they don't listen.
I think
so-
that the tack to take would be to ask you to write it first. That way we know what's in it.
All right, so
Okay.
in the end, we'll work up our 3 or whatever issues, ask her to bring it to the board, to the
Yeah, but this to our board.
authority. The authority will say yes, and then ask the
David and
attorney to
Karen.
take it to the local legislators to be able to
Yeah.
do that,
Or-
okay?
Okay, those in
or the
favor of
chair,
term
it might
limits,
come
please raise your
better.
hand.
We're not exactly friends.
Okay,
If you're in
Okay.
favor of term limits, please raise your hand. Okay, opposed? All right, carries 2-1.
all right, so, excuse me, I wanna make sure, that's, 6 years,
6 year, 2 6-year terms, and then you can be off a year,
And be reappointed.
and then come if you want to be reappointed. All right, the second one was appointment with recommendations. Do you want to put that in there, that the water authority can make recommendations to, that it's required that we make the recommendations to the county?
Now, the way it works right now, so everybody knows, is, if you wanna be on, you put out the volunteer form, you fill out the form, send it in, commissioner signs off on it, and it's put in a book. It's put in a book specifically by date signed off on. So, when we get ready to vote on who it's gonna be done, if the first one in the book chronologically is voted on. With the Board of Commissioners, the first person who gets 3 is selected, and we don't go any farther. So dates are really important to be able to do that. This will change the way it's done
For this
board.
particular board?
for this authority, and say that we will prioritize to who we want to be able to do it.
And that's the only way we're gonna get them to do that, to listen to
Yes.
us, is to put it in the amendment.
And in my opinion, this could be the impetus to change what I think is a bad
Yeah, buddy.
selecting.
Okay.
We're having some issues
I didn't have Stephanie. would
on
you
the
repeat
Board of
that, please?
Commissioners to do this.
I
She
think this
said-
could be the impetus for the Board of Commissioners to
Yes.
look at the way they appoint for other
Okay.
boards as well.
It is not very good. I mean.
No,
if
it's
you-
not.
We get the first person in there, and then when you have to vote down somebody, that is never very
Yeah,
positive.
the more qualified person may be the fourth one, and you're
Yep,
only gonna
and
take
that's
three.
exactly what happens.
Madam
in-
Chair, Joseph had a comment.
The current process, does the future appointee, submit like a resume and?
Yes.
Okay, all right, and the credentials show what they're, and kind of, proposition to the board of why they should be selected? Okay.
And then put into.
Well, if it's doing on a voluntary basis, I understand that, but if we're picking somebody, do we still have to do that? I mean, if we know somebody we want to be there, do they have to submit a resume?
I think the issue has to be, we, the Board of Commissioners, will want to make sure that this person's a volunteer.
Okay.
We don't want to select somebody and say, hey, and I don't want to do that. You know, the Board of Commissioners won't want to get involved in that. We want to make sure that that person has in fact signed up,
Okay,
yes.
Okay,
All right, so
those-
I'm for that.
all right, so we have, let's see, how should we word the motion? A motion to require recommendation to the Board of Commissioners from the Water Authority on appointments in the future. And then Stephanie can put it in the right words when she drafts the legislation.
Okay,
Do I have someone that makes that?
I'm making that motion.
Do I have a second? Do you second that?
I second it.
Okay.
Okay,
All right, is there any further discussion? All right, this is on appointing with our recommendation. All in favor, raise your hand. And opposed? Okay, 2 to 1.
Jeff, are you opposed to that, or?
Well, I'm not a voting member.
He can't
Oh,
vote.
Okay,
And then the last one is on compensation.
Sorry.
And I don't know if y'all are in concurrence. I just, for people particularly, if you appoint somebody that works and they have to take time off their job and that in some way negatively impacts their income, I don't think it's fair not to compensate in some way. And like I said, when I was on the board, it may have been more when you got there. Well, it might have, because it went up to $350, but I got $50 a meeting.
I will tell you, currently, the Board of Elections, they are $100, I think $100 a month. But that's, they meet once a month as well, and then the chair is $125.
now, a lot of the boards I'm on,
That's-
Board of Health, Hospital Authority, there's no compensation.
The Airport Authority doesn't compensate its members.
Well, either we need to get compensation or give up $20.
Well, I was told the $20 is, the, travel and all that
Per
stuff.
diem.
Per diem, and they just said, we're just gonna.
Okay, I just take the word of the law, and it says you
Yeah,
don't get
yeah,
nothing
I
except
agree.
what your expenses are, so,
Let's bring it to the board.
okay?
Any comments you had?
I mean, since my short time here, the meetings that we have on a regular basis now, while the main monthly meeting is running smoother, it's these auxiliary committees that we're really getting into the weeds where they're taking up an hour, 2 hours, of people's time, so it is a more time commitment.
Yeah,
You're
Now-
expecting this to be a working board.
Absolutely, absolutely.
well, maybe what we could do in this committee is recommend that we look at including compensation and let the whole
Yes.
board have input into the amount of compensation.
And let's not be afraid to bring it up to our peers and say, hey, we think it needs to be $100 a month, as an example. Let's not waffle with them.
Right.
If we think it needs to be $100 a month, let's say the board, we think it needs to be $100 a month. If they say, no, and we say, all right. So I think.
Or
we
somebody
need to
may
at
say,
least
no, it ought to be
change the-
$200 a
But
month.
the finance committee would have to be involved in this as
Right.
well. I mean, it's gonna have to be part of your budget, so
Right.
it's,
At least we need to
involves
change
more.
the words that's in there now.
Right, I think we need to,
we can change the words to allow for compensation as set by the authority.
right, we could do that.
I
That would
like
work
those
too.
words a lot,
Yeah.
because then we can do something about that, and say, all right, we think it's $100, here it is,
Okay, I can't make a motion. Somebody want to move what Stephanie just said?
I make a motion to follow what Stephanie just said.
And I second.
Okay, all in favor, raise your hand. Unanimous, all right. Is there anything else in there that y'all think we need to address?
Thank you for doing this.
Well, I'm glad, I just think there's some things that needed to be changed since, I think it
A
was
couple
nineteen
people of ours
ninety-three.
walked out who said,
Wow.
Yeah, I was thinking it was 89, but you're right, 93 was the
I
last.
think this one's 93.
all right, and I think it's the best point of all of
Actually,
this
it's
so
92.
far is getting it to Stephanie so that she can, really get it
That's 30
worked
years.
up. Because they turn around and let's say David Knight takes it and understands something that we say to him, he takes it to a bill writer, and between when we talked to him and when he got in the car and turned it
there's no
over to the
telling.
bill writer, a whole bunch gets left
Yeah.
out. If he has something that says, hey, this is pretty close, put that
Right.
into,
I think legislative council, I think their goal is you have to read it 6 times and it still doesn't make sense. And then, if that happens, it's a good bill, send it on.
Nobody can refute it then, because they
That's
don't
right.
understand it. Okay, well, we will take these recommendations then back to the full meeting in June. And I appreciate your time. And, if anything else comes up that you think we need to discuss, let me know. Motion to adjourn?
so moved?
Second? In favor? All right. Thank you again. I appreciate it very much.
Thank you for yelling for me.
Yeah, it would have been tough.
So,
Pardon?
first,
Oh, well, thank you.
And two, and this is not first, because I just say, what legislators do when they, how it does not.
two times.
That was
Turn the
really-
mics off.
I'm glad you brought that up, because if we get it, Stephanie, and write it, it'll be like we want it.
It bugs me, because they just go and break.
Okay, that's, I just wanted to make sure that
I just.
Yep. Yeah, that's kind of like the riders they put on the bills in Congress. It just takes me beyond words that they let them stick a rider on a bill, but it has nothing to do with it.